Working with wood, metal and plastic can be great fun. A raw material like this doesn't look like much to start with, but with a bit of work and perseverance, we can produce something fantastic like this. However, it's very important to understand that technology workshops are potentially the most dangerous places in a school. All sorts of injuries can happen, anything from hearing loss to losing a finger. Better make that several fingers. Now, this is clearly a different working environment than, say, a maths class, isn't it? Because of the dangers, we have to be extremely careful in any workshop. While the designers of your technology workshop thought about safety, and your teachers are working behind the scenes to make your workshop a safe place, there's also a lot that you can do to prevent any injuries or accidents. A good way to start thinking about safety is to consider what's called the risk management process. The first part of this process is to identify hazards. A hazard is anything that has the potential to cause injury or illness. Now, it may not look that dangerous, but this hammer is definitely a hazard. If not used properly, there's a real risk that the head of this hammer could cause someone an injury. Once you've identified a hazard, the next step is to assess and manage the risks associated with it. So, when using a hammer, you should make sure it's in good condition and the head isn't loose. And you should keep your hands well clear of the point of impact. Pretty simple, really, isn't it? Finally, if you or your teacher believe that a hazard cannot be safely managed, then you should avoid that hazard altogether. Keep this three-point risk management process in mind as we look at the hazards when working with wood, plastic and metal. Let's start with a simple hazard. In a technology workshop, students need to move around more than in most other classrooms. Your workshop has been designed to minimise risks, but the edges on benches and machines can still cause injuries.
Some of the dangers from moving it around the workshop probably involve what someone else may or may not have left in the workshop. So you're thinking about sharp objects like nails, like used staples, screws that have fallen out of jars, broken glass. You're thinking of that you might slip on something like spilled oil or something like this. Also, when you go to get that piece of timber from the shelf that's been stacked incorrectly, taking a piece of timber down might bring the whole forest down on your head. Same thing applies with boxes. Other things that might be inadvertently left in your way are things like electrical leads and cords. People can trip on things like this. So this is the type of things that you've got to be a little bit wary, because someone else might have been in the workshop before you and not been as careful as maybe they should have.
All students working with wood, metal and plastic need to take some simple precautions whenever they're in a workshop. Long hair and clothing must be tied back and all loose jewellery removed. Students must wear a protective apron or coat and sturdy shoes. These precautions will reduce the risk of injury as you move around the workshop. The safest way to move around is to be careful and behave appropriately. Fooling around in an English class may get you a detention. Fool around in a technology workshop and you might end up with a nasty injury. Never run or walk quickly in a workshop. Move slowly and deliberately, staying well away from other people and always watch where you're going. Remember that bumping into things or tripping may not just give you a bruise or a scrape, but may cause a chain reaction resulting in more serious injuries to yourself or others. Mess and workshops don't mix. People can slip or trip on all sorts of materials, and a messy workbench is an unsafe workbench. If you spill or drop something, it's important to clean it up straight away. After cleaning up a spill, you should also consider cordoning off the area until the surface is dry. If you've spilled a hazardous substance, talk to your teacher before taking the appropriate action. Hazardous substances will be discussed in more detail later in the video. When you've finished working, clean up after yourself. This involves not just putting away any equipment or materials you've used, but also cleaning the workspace and floor. Food and drink left in a technology workshop can easily become contaminated by contact with hazardous materials, especially dusts and vapours. If contaminated food or drink is consumed, the consequences can be severe. For these reasons, food and drink should never be brought into a workshop, including your unfinished drink from recess. Workshops can be very noisy places, even without the machines going. Normal conversation is usually measured at around 60 decibels, but the noise from some of these machines can be up to 110 decibels, which is 100,000 times the sound energy of normal conversation, and that can't be good for our ears. Most of the equipment used in your workshop has been designed to minimise noise, and your teacher will control the amount of time you're exposed to hazardous noise. But you too have to be careful, especially now that you know that damage to your hearing usually shows up later in life. Hearing protection like earmuffs is most important when using power tools and machinery. But even a simple tool like a hammer can produce hazardous levels of noise. There's a lot happening to the air in a technology workshop. The chemicals, materials and machines used are constantly producing dusts, vapours and fumes, all ending up in the air around us. Your workshop already has built-in general ventilation. This helps to bring in clean air and take out contaminants. But working with woods, metals and plastics can often create contaminants that need to be contained at the source. For this reason, many technology workshops have local exhaust ventilation, like fume cupboards and extraction devices. Depending on the situation, you may also need to wear a dust mask or respirator. Dust masks are suitable for large particles. When working with wood, metal and plastic, you'll come in contact with materials and substances that need to be handled with care. An important source of information about hazardous substances are Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDS. They outline correct handling procedures, safety issues and first aid advice. Manufacturers are required by law to provide MSDS upon request, and your school should have an MSDS on display for every hazardous substance that's being used. All chemicals and hazardous materials used in a technology workshop have to be safely stored and comprehensively labelled. You need to understand the dangers involved with each chemical you use and follow the correct procedure. For some substances, all you need to do is wash your hands after using them. But others require full personal protection, a great deal of care and teacher supervision. One other thing, I know it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised just how often it actually happens. Make sure you don't rub your eyes or face with your hands when working with hazardous substances. When you use a tool, make sure that it's in good condition. Damaged or faulty tools, like a file with a cracked or loose handle, are not only unsafe, they're also harder to use. Also, make sure that you use each tool correctly. Let's look at the correct way to use this wood chisel. Firstly, wear safety glasses to protect your eyes from flying bits of wood. Then, secure the wood using a clamp or vise and cut away from yourself. If you need to use a mallet, keep your hands clear of the point of impact. Always carry a chisel with the blade facing down and pass the chisel to someone else with the handle towards them. Another common process is cutting metal with a hacksaw. Again, it's a good idea to wear eye protection and also a dust mask to protect your eyes and lungs from metal particles. Then, secure the metal using a clamp or vise and balance yourself with one foot slightly in front of the other. The cut should be made as close as possible to the vise or clamp. Begin by making a small starting groove by drawing the blade towards yourself. Keep your hands clear of the cutting area at all times. Take long strokes, making sure to keep the blade straight and use its full length. Applying a lot of pressure is not only inefficient, it's also unsafe, especially towards the end of the cut. There's a correct procedure for each process using a tool, and you may need specific protective equipment. Your teacher will provide you with this information before you use any tool. Finally, after using a tool, put it back where it belongs. Tools and equipment put in the wrong place or left lying around can easily become hazards.